The tears aren't coming. The tears just aren't coming.
Okay. Just to be clear, it looks like he's dead or he is dead?
It just looks like he's dead. He's got, like, blue paint on him or something. But he's going to be fine.
What is wrong with you?
Doctor!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and just recently, I guess Rob from Comics Explained, he's kind of talked about his position as far as local comic shops, brick and mortar, comic book retailers, whatever you want to call them, and maybe the future moving on to digital. And maybe it's time to let local comic shops die. And while I greatly respect Rob in his opinion, and I think he's great for the industry, and he has a lot of influence, and I think he spreads the message of comic books as a medium very well on his channel. And so this isn't me saying that Rob's a bad guy, but I certainly disagree with his opinion there. And here to talk with me about this and maybe give some of his opinions is my retail expert, the curmudgeon of Critical. Pele, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. You doing all right this morning?
I'm doing pretty darn good. So this is actually nothing new from Rob. This is a position that he's had for quite a while. But I did have a few of my viewers contact me and say, "Hey, would you mind addressing this?" And, yeah, might as well. It's an interesting topic. His idea is that we're going to a paperless society. There will no longer be books. There's not going to be magazines. There won't be comic books. And it's time to accept the change and just start moving full force ahead towards digital. Do you agree with that one, Pele?
I think he's a massive butthole. No, I'm just kidding. I like Rob. I just don't agree with Rob here. And here's the deal. He's looking at it strictly from a consumer standpoint, just consuming the comics. And God, that guy can go through comics. I mean, he'll go through, 100 digital comics in an afternoon and just speed read through them. He's not, and I've kind of laughed about it before, that he doesn't really pay attention to the art. You could have stick figures on the page and he hardly would care. So he's not really a lover of the art form. He's a consumer of the stories. So you kind of have to take that from that perspective. Digital as a format, as far as on tablets typically, you get a smaller view of the page, unless you've got like an iPad Pro or, you're looking at a computer monitor, you get a smaller view of the page. So I know a lot of people that even read comics on their phones. So, it's tiny view. You're not really taking in the artwork. You're looking at it just from the story standpoint. And for those types of people, I think that's a very appealing thing for them. I don't really, and there's really been no sign that digital eats into physical sales. So it's usually largely digital is sold to people who probably weren't going to buy physical comics to begin with. It's just something that they can consume while they're on the go and, out and about or whatever. So, and that's fine. It's absolutely great. But as far as replacing physical, not in the foreseeable future. I think Marvel is even abandoning their digital platform now. So
that was a misleading headline, Pele. We talked about it on the channel.
I know. But I do think that they're not going into it full steam. They know that their bread is buttered on the side of collectors. And we've talked about this a lot, that it's not impressive to show somebody your digital collection. You get out your iPad. Hey, look at my comic collection. You get out your iPad and you just flip through pages of, files. Who cares? It's not something, that's an achievement. You just use bandwidth to download a bunch of comics. No big deal. A healthy comic collection is a living thing. You've taken that time to acquire all these great published works, and you've taken this time to publish all these great works, and a lot of collectors care about the condition. They care about, how they're stored. There's a lot of issues involved there. Collectors just love collecting, and you just don't get that with the digital format. So for consumers reading, I even read comics that way. I'll sit there with my iPad and I'll sit there and I'll read comics for an afternoon. but it's, it's not what I buy. I very rarely buy a digital comic book. Usually it's just the Marvel Unlimited or whatever, whatever they have in their free service, not what's, not what's out now. So I think you probably the same way.
I'm in a more remote location, so I have to read digital if I want to have access to a lot of books. But a lot of the books I read on digital, I end up buying them physical if I like them enough, or if I go, oh wow, that was an amazing story. I'll go out and get the trades, or if I really like it, I'll take the time and the enormous effort to actually go get the single comic issues, because it's very hard to get them, in a more remote location like I'm in here in the Philippines. So digital absolutely has its place, on the market. But I think what he's failing to think about is the scope of the readership, or the scope of the hobby. Like, there's an entire economy dedicated to back issues and collector issues, graded comics, and that economy dwarfs digital sales. It's not even close.
Yeah, it dwarfs new comic sales. I mean, it's not even close. We talk about that all the time, that now, I mean, I'm not going to count the last few months because just haven't had new comics.
You're talking about your shop specifically.
Well, I'm talking about, as far as the broader market, sales dollars for sales dollars. My shop, it's like they're like 18 to 20% of my sales. New comics are. Overall, the back issues outsell new comics by about 3 to 1. If you count in all the vintage comic sales, you count in all the collectible comics, the Batman #1 that sold the other day for $480,000, if you count in that whole market of back issues and vintage comics, it's about 3 to 1. So yeah, it's a much bigger slice of the pie, I think, than he can realize, because, he's just not into that market. He doesn't understand it.
Yeah, and not all comic readers are comic collectors. Now, I'm certainly not a collector. I don't go out there specifically going to buy comics like as an investment, but I do want full runs in physical of the stories I really appreciate or really like. So in that respect, I guess I'm a collector, but it's not really for investment purposes for me. So I'm personally, I don't ever plan on giving up physical comics, but I'm in my 40s. My son, who I read comics with, he's 4 years old. He consumes almost all of his entertainment via digital now. It's on phones and tablets. So I do think there will be a day where the amount of new physical comics or that market will be shrunk to almost nothing, or might not even exist. But we're talking decades away from there, from this point at least.
Yeah, we'll be old men by the time that happens. And, and even then, vintage comics will still be sold and traded, and probably be an even bigger market than it is now.
As things become more digital, those digital files, at least at this point, really don't maintain or have value. And people are going to want to hold or to own things they can hold that have monetary value, so they can diversify portfolios, and things of that nature. So those things are going to become more rare and more valuable over time. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you look at what investors love is collectible assets, because they're basically untraceable securities. They're stores of value that you can put money into that you're not, paying taxes on, or you should pay taxes on, but a lot of people don't. It's kind of like a store of value that allows you to be more flexible in your investing. I know that people hate that. There's a lot of collectors that really, really hate the vintage comic market, because it drives the value, the prices up on those vintage comics. Because they'd love to be able to order, they'd love to be able to purchase, like a Green Lantern #1, but they don't want to have to pay, $10,000 for it. But, there's scarcity. Scarcity drives price. That's just the way it is. And digital allow people to have that vintage comic if they want to read it. So in that capacity, it's still good for the physical market, because it allows, for type of equality. So
Yeah, speaking of your Green Lantern #1 example, like if you read that on digital, yes, you will. It is a gateway into a past time, just as far as the culture, the writing style, maybe what the art looked like. But you still don't feel it. You can't touch history like you can with that physical copy of Green Lantern #1. It's just different.
When I pick up my tablet and read Green Lantern #1, it's like, oh, this is cool. The artwork's neat. It's ahead of its time. The story's interesting, but that's it. Done. When I go pick up my Green Lantern #1 and I open it up, that smell, you get that kind of wood chemical smell a little bit, the ink, the physical tactile sensation of actually holding the comic and everything. And it's like a time machine. It takes you back to a different time, and you get to indulge and feel that physical experience while you're enjoying the comic. And it's just a completely different thing. You appreciate the artwork and the art form a lot more when you're physically holding the real thing. And one of the things that I really noticed lately is I went through reading that Amazing Spider-Man run. I've already passed, I'm at issue number 328 now, 329, right in the middle of the Venom saga right now. Starting with those early books, you have to be real careful with them. And by the time I got to issue 100, it was just I felt like I was back in the comic shop, when I was a little kid again. It's just you could smell the vintage comics in the air, because I'd taken the comics out and gently put them aside. I'd read one and get the other one out. I want more people to be able to experience that. I want them to be able to enjoy that sensual experience. And that's just not something you're going to get from a digital file.
Another point is there's almost like an implication that comic shops are a charity right now, that the only reason that they're being held up is because people are going to those shops and giving them money almost unwillingly or out of pity. The reason the market exists and the reason it's there is because there's money to be made. Now, are a lot of people becoming millionaires or doing great financially because of their comic shop? I don't think that's probably the case, but there is money to be made. If there wasn't money in there, there wouldn't be comic shops anymore.
Right. It's true. There wouldn't be comic shops anymore. And I'm reading more and more shops now that I'm talking with several shop owners, transitioning them to be back issue type shops, to kind of diversify for the future. And there is money to be made in it. You have to run it right. You have to educate yourself and know what you're doing as a shop owner. And you have to sort of, build a certain clientele. But yeah, it's a very lucrative thing when approached properly. And as long as you keep your expectations and you at a certain point and you realize that it's going to take some time. But, there's money. And a lot of people do it because they have a passion for it. They love comics. Almost everybody that gets into owning a comic shop is because they love comic books. But, your love isn't going to keep your doors open. So you have to be able to make enough money to pay your bills. And, and as long as the market, as far as back issues goes the way it is, those shops are going to be able to remain open. The new market, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be back on its feet within the next 12 months. It'll be interesting to see how many stores survive till then. But I do think it'll be enough to actually carry the market forward. And then you'll have new people that'll see vacancies in the market, where other shops close during this time, that they're going to say, hey, I could open a comic book shop now. And maybe they'll be successful. And then you'll start to see that start to expand. So, it's definitely a flexible thing. It's a waxing and waning, but I do feel that the market is still going to be, it's still going to be competitive. It's still going to be lucrative for some time to come. So, and
if you just look at comic book readership, it is relatively small. I mean, it is very small. The hobby is pretty close knit. Every time we lose a physical comic shop, you lose readers. You lose people that are part of the hobby, because now they can no longer get their hands on physical comics. Now they have to go online. Depending on what city they're in, now you're adding shipping fees on top of the outrageous cover prices that we already have for new comics right now, and that drives further readers away. So getting rid of comic shops would make the hobby like exponentially smaller than it is today anyway. So I don't understand. That's one of the things I don't get, is because that would decrease like his viewership and in his audience on YouTube, because a lot of those people that maybe tune in there and to see what they want to buy next, they're just not going to buy anything next because they don't want to read digital. And if we give up comic shops, there's no way to get it physical unless it's through shipping.
Yeah, he's kind of hurting himself. Rob's kind of hurting himself in that regard, because, like we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I have a little corner there on the counter. That's Rob's corner, where the latest issues that he talks about on his show, we pull those back issues. We put some examples there so people could readily have them available. If it's a slab book, we'll even put the slabs over, we'll put the graded comics there with them. If it's like a Fantastic Four 49 or 50 or Silver Surfer #1 or #4, we'll put that with them, and to kind of promote him. And he helps promote us, and we sell those back issues and those vintage comics. So it's a symbiotic relationship. I kind of wish that he understood that a little bit better. But like I said, he's mostly a comics consumer. He's not a collector per se, not a serious collector. So
my point is, why would you just abandon the market so you could speed up the death of it and move everybody over to digital? If not everyone's ready to let it go, and the market's still there and it's still relatively healthy, then it'll die when it's ready to die. Do I think that there will be local comic shops all over America and the world 40 years from now? Probably not, actually. But we're not. My point is, we're just not there yet.
Yeah, I think that he's trying to be outrageous a bit, try to get some, maybe get a little attention, get a little bit more attention, get a little bit, kind of, stir up some conversation, kind of get the social media thing stirred up. Because I saw some, I've seen some replies to this, and it's like some people got mad. So, he kind of kicked the hornet's nest a bit on this one. So, I think if that's what he was trying to do, then he was very successful at it. And, it was kind of inflammatory, and, maybe it's a conversation we need to have. And it's, I've had customers walk in and talk about, oh, did you hear what Rob said? Rob said the comic shops need to die. And I'm like, I don't know if he exactly said it that way, but he said that, it's best to just go ahead and pass away, pass on. But, I don't think that, I almost don't think he meant it. I think it's more just to kind of get attention and to stir up some emotion and energy. So,
well, it certainly stirred up a conversation here. If that was his intent, it worked, and we kind of talked about it, said our piece. I do think there won't be comic shops eventually, but now isn't the time. And the idea that we should just abandon comic shops, doesn't really work for me, because there are too many readers that only want to read physical.
Exactly. Yeah, and I do encourage everyone here, despite inflammatory comments that he may have made, he does a wonderful series at Comics Explained. I watch his videos all the time, and it's fantastic. He's a really good presenter. He presents the stories in a great light with amazing, video accompaniment, and he's got he uses video and clips in the actual comics themselves to great advantage, the panels and stuff like that to great advantage, and while he's telling the stories that are in the comics. And it's a fantastic viewing experience. He's got a great voice for it. I think that everybody here, should go subscribe to his channel and enjoy that, because, it is really good, and it does give you a better perspective on the comic stories in the past. And perhaps you'll learn some things about certain characters that you didn't know before. And everybody wins at that point, and then you can go pick up those comics.
Absolutely. Well, Pele, I really appreciate your time, brother.
Okay, you take care, Wes. Peace, man.